Hello and welcome to Ottawa Business Matters, presented by the Ottawa Board of Trade. We are engaging conversations about the federal election 2021. The Ottawa Board of Trade is the voice of business in Ottawa and a key economic stakeholder. Our mission is to create a thriving business community. We are so thrilled to be meeting with candidates in this election to talk about what's important to the business community and for the purposes of sharing what our priorities are with these candidates, and also to learn more about their party platforms and how they're aligned with our priorities for the business community. I'm thrilled today to be joined by David Coletto. David is a member of the Board of Directors for the Ottawa Board of Trade, as well as the founder and CEO of Abacus Data, which is a leading Canadian market research firm headquartered right here in Ottawa. Welcome, David.
Well, it's great to be back and good to see you. Sueling, how you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thank you. So we've really enjoyed these conversations that we're having with local candidates, and I know that you've been very involved in this election. And how have you been finding it so far?
Well, I'm excited that we are well past the halfway point, but it's been a really interesting campaign, and doing these interviews and getting the local taste of what's happening here in Ottawa has actually been really interesting. And so I'm excited for our final conversation today.
I agree. So please welcome Matt Triemstra. He is with the Conservative Party of Canada. Matt is proud to be born and raised in Nepean. He is a community leader, volunteer, and public affairs executive. After a successful career working on Parliament Hill for Conservative members of Parliament, Matt has spent the last decade working in the private sector in public affairs with some of Canada's top companies. He has a proven track record of working with all political parties to get things done. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
And Matt, great to see you, and I hope you're well. Thanks for joining us. I want to start with, I guess, the broad first, maybe not most important, but one of the most important questions, which is, you know, you're looking to become the MP for Nepean. What would you say are your personal priorities for the Ottawa region? And if you could also speak to how you think the Conservative Party would look at the region if it were elected after September 20th.
Yeah, no, it's a great starting point, and it's why I'm running. I've got 3 kids of my own. I'm born and raised here in Ottawa, so a lifelong resident. So I think I, can speak a little bit to, what the city of Ottawa is feeling. But listen, I think, in Ottawa, where the median income is about $85K, maybe even down to $50K in Nepean, I think that affordability is just such a key question for us, right? So it just seems like the price of everything goes up. It costs me over $90 to fill my minivan, the price of groceries, so how do we really deal with the cost of living, for the average Ottawa family? Related to that is, how do we get young people into the housing market? We've all seen this huge housing boom, and there's simply just not enough supply, right? And so affordability housing. And then I've got 3 kids of my own from 9 to 16. We saw how hard this pandemic was on them when all of a sudden their extracurriculars were gone, school was different. And it just made me realize, that mental health is health. And we've been saying that for a long time, but how do we actually take tangible steps to address it? And so I think those 3 things, affordability, housing, and mental health, speak to me and my family. And I think to everyday families in Ottawa.
Fantastic, Matt. And I agree. It's something that has been a huge part of how we have all responded to this pandemic. So I appreciate that. So Matt, I have sort of a 2-part question. As you know, tourism is very important to Ottawa's economy as the nation's capital, and it's often considered the front door to every other form of economic development. So the first is, how do you propose that we will help this sector rebound for us in Ottawa as an economic driver? And then also, tourism, along with hospitality, restaurants, and Main Street businesses, have been some of the hardest hit during this pandemic. I know that they're calling for special supports as we come out of the pandemic, specifically some tailored wage and rent subsidies. So I wondered what your party's position is on that as well.
Yeah. Listen, job number one for an elected Conservative government is jobs. We want to bring back 1 million jobs, and we need to get our small businesses back on their feet. I actually think if you look at our Conservative plan, we've got a couple innovative solutions, things that, maybe you haven't seen before, right? And so, just two of them I'll touch on. One of them is this new Dine and Discover program where if you go to a dine-in restaurant Monday through Wednesday, we're actually going to give you a 50% rebate to Canadians on the food and alcohol or non-alcoholic beverages, that they consume. And we actually expect this could pump about $1 billion back into the tourism and hospitality business. And second, as we all know, living in Ottawa is a great destination to go to. School trips come here every year from everywhere in the country, frankly. And how do we invest in getting Canadians to take vacations in Canada and in Ottawa, right? And so we're actually going to initiate a 15% tax credit for vacation expenses up to about $1,000 to encourage Canadians to vacation again as the pandemic lets up and lets us travel again, right? And I think that small business and operators who rely solely on Canadian tourism, like many in Ottawa do, we're really going to benefit from this program. So I think that answers your first question. Your second question of what are we going to do for businesses, especially with the rise of the Delta variant, right? And I think it's really important to acknowledge that as Canadians are vaccinated, as the economy reopens, we do plan on winding down emergency support programs responsibly. We believe that people need to get back to work. I was at the Pizza in Nepean the other day, and help wanted, driver wanted, cook wanted, 3 signs across, right? And we're hearing that a lot everywhere I go. But as we wind down the programs, we also, I think, need to bring in new programs to support our small businesses specifically, right? And so there's 2 programs I want to mention. One, there's going to be this Rebuilding Main Street tax credit. So it's a 25% tax credit on amounts that Canadians personally invest in their small business up to $100,000. And the next one is launching the Main Street Business Loan, and it's going to be loans up to $200,000. I think during the pandemic, we saw these CEBA loans, the Canadian Emergency Benefit Account, and we are still going to do 25% of that being forgivable. So I think those are just 2 really concrete measures that we're going to do to help support the small businesses.
Very good.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate the detail of that, and I think a lot of our members will find those programs really, really interesting and valuable. I want to switch gears to another sector in our city that is a large employer, also really important to our future, and that's technology in the high tech sector. We talk to folks across the city at Invest Ottawa, at the Canada North Tech Park, and they all say that they feel Canada's falling behind when it comes to keeping up with other players around the world. So what's your vision? What's the party's vision when it comes to accelerating growth in the high tech sector with a focus obviously on Ottawa, but also across the country as well?
Yeah. Listen, everybody on this call knows that Ottawa has, a really talented workforce. There are so many advantages to living and working in Ottawa, and this should be a great place to launch innovative products and businesses. But too often some of our, Canadian innovators run into barriers, right? And instead of scaling their businesses up in Ottawa, we hear stories about them moving to the US or building their business elsewhere or selling to foreign investors, right? And so I think a key part of our Canada's recovery plan for the Conservatives is how do we strengthen Canada as a world leader in technology and really stop and end kind of an innovation drain from people from leaving Ottawa, from leaving Canada. Maybe just 3 things, that I would say are going to put us in a really good starting position. But I think we need to incentivize Canadian companies to develop products here. I think if we cut the income tax rate in half for new patented technologies, I think that will really help, giving us some of the best rates in the world. We're going to establish a Canadian Advanced Research Agency to fund major cutting advances. And I think we need to make it more attractive to invest in small startups by introducing the use of flow-through shares. And it just would make us a world leader in financing there, right? So I think we just need to understand that we need a detailed plan to unleash Canadian innovation and, secured those jobs in Ottawa and make sure that businesses know that this is a friendly place to invest and to make a home in.
That's awesome. Thank you. Oh, David's just back here.
You mentioned in your priorities housing affordability as one of the top three that you mentioned, and we are hearing it more and more here across the city. Business owners realizing that in order to recruit and retain people here in Ottawa, that housing affordability is a key factor. It used to be that Ottawa was a more affordable place to live compared to Toronto or Vancouver or some of the other, or Montreal. It's still more affordable, but it's all relative. And I think affordability is a big challenge. So maybe you could provide us with a little more detail on what, the Conservatives have announced in terms of housing affordability. I'm interested in both, the supply side solutions, as well as anything that you think the Conservatives are going to do on the demand side as well.
Yeah. Listen, Ottawa can have the greatest jobs in the world, and we can have the best companies, but if people can't afford to live here, then how are we going to attract talent? I think it's as simple as that, right? And so I think we have to start by acknowledging that supply is a problem. And so there's two things that we want to do there. We want to build 1 million homes in the next 3 years. I think that's really important. And there is also a phenomenon happening in Toronto and Vancouver, but I think we're seeing in Ottawa too, where we have foreign investors who are buying property in Canada but not living here. And so that results as well in a crowded market. So we're actually going to ban that practice. And instead, if you want to invest in Canada, we want your investment, please, come. But how do we get you to invest, in maybe in rental properties, right? So I think that's a key factor. Where we build these houses is also important, right? So how do we build on transit risks, transit dense ideas, transit high density areas, right? So how do we build in the right places? And I actually think that the government of Canada, can take a leadership role here. We are going to allow public servants to work from home permanently if they choose. They've proved that it works really well, and we want to let that continue. And part of that, I think, will release some space. And so in our platform, we're actually talking about releasing 15% of government holdings, whether that's empty property or empty office towers, to be used for and rezoned for housing. So I think it's the federal government really leading and saying, look, we've got extra space, we've got extra assets we don't need. We're going to use those to build more houses, right? So more supply, a ban on foreign ownership, building in the right places, and the government leading by example by releasing some of its assets for housing. That's all part of the Conservative plan.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks,
Sueling?
Matt. So immigration is critical to Canada's and Ottawa's long-term growth, both from a perspective of talent and diversity. The business community is calling for a simplification to the immigration process. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, listen, I couldn't agree more. If we're going to succeed as a city and as a country, we simply need to welcome the best and brightest from around the world to fill critical gaps we have and to grow our economy and to see robust growth, right? And so I would say two things on this, although there's a lot more in our plan. One, we have to address the administrative backlog. It's becoming a bit ridiculous. We simply have to do better at getting rid of that backlog. Secondly, we've heard too many stories of people who live abroad and try to come to Canada, but their credentials aren't recognized. And so they end up as Uber drivers or for skip the dishes. And we have to do better. And so we're going to launch a task force to recognize, foreign credentials, and maybe even consider, maybe there's a way that we can update those credentials, with Canadian universities or educational institutes, and they can do that before they enter Canada, right? And so that's one really practical thing we're going to do. We've also seen a huge, crisis in long-term care. And I think one of the biggest needs we saw there was PSWs, right? We just need more of them. And we're actually going to fast track and streamline applications there as well. So if you're coming to Ottawa and you already have PSW skills, let's get you to work right away. So I think those are three things that we really want to do to strengthen our immigration and help Ottawa hire, the best and brightest from around the world.
Thank you. Now, you sort of touched on that, the federal offices. So big cities like Ottawa have been hit hard and differently than other areas of the country. And the long-term impacts are still unknown. So many business districts in larger urban areas have been built up, and a lot of SMEs have been built up to serve these markets. And in Ottawa specifically, the federal government is a big part of that. So what do you think an urban recovery plan should include, and how do you see the business community playing a part in supporting?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just say that there is no economic recovery in this country without small business, right? So that's just so critically important. We see them as primary drivers of getting our economy back on track. And not only do we need our existing small businesses as the engine of the economy reopening, we need thousands more to fill our main streets, right? And so I think our job at the federal level is to set the right climate, introduce the right programs, the right environment so that our small businesses can succeed. But we also want to cooperate with Ottawa, right? We want a For Ottawa, by Ottawa program. We want to be a partner for the city of Ottawa. Normally, the expression in politics is Ottawa doesn't know best, but then you're speaking more of the House of Commons, which is in Ottawa. But in this case, I think Ottawa, and listening to the city of Ottawa and their needs, we're going to be a stable and predictable funding partner for them. And we can't do it without small businesses. It's as simple as that.
Well, speaking of funding, I've got a quick lightning round for you here. If the Conservatives do form government, curious on funding commitments for 3 big projects that the city is looking towards, and I know is very important to the business community here. So if you could just let me know whether you're able to commit that the conservative government would fund phase 3 of Ottawa's light rail transit system?
Yes, in fact, Aaron's already announced that we'd fund the Canada portion. And for Barrhaven, we just need to treat people fairly and compassionately if houses are being taken away.
Okay. What about the Byward Market revitalization?
I think it's so needed. I work downtown. I think we need it. And I think we're going to work with the city and the province when they come to us to support them. Okay.
And lastly, the Le Breton Flats redevelopment. What's your view on funding that? And if you've got any broader perspectives on that project, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I think it's the same for me as the Byward Market. I think the city of Ottawa, I know, wants to invest there. And once the province comes on board as a funding partner, we want to be there as an equal partner as well. Again, I think it's land that could be put to better use. It's great to go down there for concerts, and let's just see that more formalized.
I'm curious, just as a follow-up, Matt, do you have any comments or any thoughts on the National Capital Commission's role in the National Capital? And do you think a conservative government would take a different approach when it comes to the NCC at all?
That's a good question, David. It's not one that I'm super familiar with, so I'm not going to comment on it. I just think that whatever the city of Ottawa decides, we have to be in consultation directly with them.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. So thank you so much for being here. I guess just as a final wrap up, if I could just ask you to share, why would business owners and leaders in our community consider voting for your party?
Yeah, I think the simple answer is that we are the party with Canada's economic recovery plan. One thing that I missed, was in addition to getting our small businesses up and running, as we wind down those emergency programs, how do we incentivize people to get back to work? And part of that is, I think, our surge job plan, in which we pay the revenue from 25 to 50% for small businesses who bring back employers with a higher tax credit for people who have been employed longer. So we are going to be there to support the small businesses. You're going to hear a lot of talk in this election around the Conservative plan to balance the deficit in 10 years. We will not do that on the backs of Canadians. We will not do that with cuts to the public service. We can only do that through robust economic growth. We're targeting 3%, and we simply cannot do that without we investing in our small businesses, right? So I really think that this election is a really clear choice. Liberals who have, called small businesses tax cheats in the past versus a Conservative government who knows that small business drives our economy, right? And so I think we can choose Canada's Economic Action Plan by voting Conservative, and selfishly as the next member of Parliament for Nepean.
Very good. Well, thank you. Well, that wraps up the questions that we had for you today. Matt, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our business community?
No final thoughts. Maybe I'll just background on me. My father owned and operated a small business. It was Triemstra Painting. I know how hard he worked. He was gone, from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. We always had family supper together. And then at 7 o'clock, he was back out the door, doing estimates. And while there was no chance of me following my father into the family business, I just saw how hard he worked. And to all of our small business owners, I know that you have been working, double time. I've heard stories of, the hotel industry in which, the general managers are managing the books by day and cleaning rooms by night because they just can't find people. Too often when we recognize our frontline workers during COVID, we're recognizing the healthcare professionals, and that is absolutely true. But we should also be recognizing all the small business owners, everybody who kept the economy running, whether it was serving food or running a hotel, or running events where possible. So you guys have done an incredible work. You've been there for us, and a Conservative government is going to be there for you.
Thank you, Matt. We appreciate it. Good luck with the rest of the campaign, and we'll see you again soon.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Matt.
See you, Matt.
So, David, that wraps up our series, and I appreciate your support in this. And I think we just want to encourage everyone in the business community to continue to be informed, to take an active part in this election, and to help shape Ottawa's future. Any final comments from you?
Well, it's been a blast doing this with you, and I think we heard some really detailed proposals from the candidates, some different perspectives on priorities, and so now it's up to our members and then the broader community to make up their minds. So I hope everybody gets out and votes, and we'll see how this ends.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, Sueling.